Greg Weeks for Graphics Programming Assignment 8. So let's start out with the texture game object and just show you what I have going on here. Alright, so a very poorly textured cottage, but the textures are showing up. And this is all going through a game object that I created. So let's get out of that. So this is all I'm calling in the init function in DXApp. So I'm creating 3 new textures: cabin texture, brick wall, chimney texture, and then we're just applying that using our game object here. And then we're applying the various textures to different parts of the mesh here. Okay, so in the draw function, all we're doing is setting it to context, setting the matrices, and then rendering. Alright, so let's go over to graphic objects, texture. Yeah, so this is just the basic object class. Nothing too exciting here compared to the other ones that I wrote. Yeah, so all this is doing is setting the texture and defining how to render. And I do have some of my model code in there because I kind of wrote all of these at once. So a lot of the stuff from question 4 kind of seeped into the rest of it. But I'm going to demonstrate each one individually. Okay. So the shader texture base class here. Yeah, so pretty straightforward compared to the other ones. Nothing too crazy. You gave a lot of this code away in previous lectures. So let's go to color light. For whatever reason, the scale is like way off. Let's see. So I do have like a directional light sitting on top of the cabin here, which is probably the worst place to put it. But you can see that that is actually working with the colors and interacting with it when I move the camera. You can actually see the reflection. I'm not quite sure if you can see it on the bottom half because I put it in like the worst possible place. Yeah, let's just see how that's working. So in DXApp, in the init function, here's what we're doing. So I'm setting the material for each individual like mesh. Sorry, each individual model in the mesh. Yeah, not really too much to see here. Again, it's pretty straightforward. So we're setting the point light parameters. This is all the basic lighting stuff going on. And then in the draw scene, we're getting the eye position and setting sending the light parameters, which kind of initializes everything. So let's actually just go into the graphic object here. Yeah, so this is pretty much just the color graphic object class, but with the light stuff kind of bootstrapped onto it. I mean, what else would you expect here? Yeah, and I believe he gave this to us, right? Yeah, this was the one that he gave to us, so I'm not going to go over that one. Cool. Let's move on to texture light game object. So wait while that compiles. So again, this is very similar to the other one, except I'm using textures this time. So the draw is pretty much identical. Oh dear, that's not supposed to happen. What happened? Just put that back. I commented out a huge chunk of code. I probably shouldn't have done that. There we go. Alright, crisis averted. Sorry to waste your time on that. Yeah, so the materials and the textures are appearing as expected. I got a light in the least strategic place possible, and it looks very ugly, but it is all working. So let's go over here. I don't know what I commented out that. Oh, I think I actually commented out all the textures, so that would explain that. So texture light. Um, so we're setting texture material, and then yeah, it's just a marriage of both of the texture and light classes. Um, it wasn't that complicated once I understood what to do with those classes, but because I skipped the lecture, or not the lecture, the assignment rather, last week, I had to figure out how to make the shader light, or shader texture light class here, and that was a pain. And then the HLSL, so I had to do all that this week, which took the brunt of my time. Um, but yeah, once I got that figured out, the actual graphic object itself was relatively straightforward. So yeah, let's just jump into the actual uh, like mesh separation thing. So I am actually rendering each individual material and texture on this object specifically. Um, so I'm just going through a for loop and doing that. This is just like a basic array, and I know this is like terrible practice because I can only have a maximum of 10, but for whatever reason I couldn't get it done. I couldn't get it working with pointers, so yeah, I'm sure I'm just really tired at this point and I can't manage to figure it out. Um, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, this works for now. But I definitely do intend on changing this. But I do have a texture array, ambient, diffuse, and specular arrays for this object specifically, which is why I was getting different textures and different materials on this cottage. Let's take a closer look here. I don't know why the scale is so off. But yeah, different materials, different textures. I was tempted to say Papa John's, but I didn't. I'm just very tired. Okay. Let's see. I think that's about it. Oh, in terms of the further work question. So just as I explained, we have arrays of textures and materials, ambient, diffuse, and specular. Um, and also I'm doing that for everything else. I'm sure you caught that. Um, so just as we're doing that, we could do that for like actual shaders within the graphics object. So I'm sure I can just take this shader and loop through all the different shaders that I actually need. Um, the tricky part would be uh, swapping them out when needed. Let's see. To be honest, I didn't quite think about this in its entirety, but I'm pretty certain having an array of shaders within a graphics object, probably like a graphics object that's not really tied to a specific like texture, texture light, whatever. It should be able to take in texture, light, and color. So it would probably look a lot like the graphics object's texture light here. Yeah. So it would probably look a lot like this, and then we would just have an array of shaders that we can loop through and sort of dynamically switch between all of them, because this is sort of like an all-encompassing class. Okay, I think that's about it for this assignment. I will see you next week.